Thursday evenings, so I encourage you to call in with any questions or comments that you may have either for myself or my guest this evening. Now also, we rebroadcast at other dates and times as well, so if you're not watching this on October 20th, well, it's not the live program, so please don't call in because we won't be here. Now, for those of you who do watch the rebroadcast in St. Paul on Monday evenings, I want to thank you for tuning in and watching us on Monday evenings. Now, of course, many folks out there know that this is an election fall, and we have quite a few elections going on here in Ramsey County. And of course, one of the elections that is going on is that for one of the positions of Ramsey County Judge. And I have with me one of the hopefuls that is running for Ramsey County Judge, and that's Ms. Connie Iverson. So with that, I want to thank Ms. Iverson for being here on the program this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Longry.
Yeah, thank you very much for being here. I know that viewers want to know more about candidates who are running for judge because really that's probably one of the positions that you hear the least about, or the least about the people who are running for those positions. So I'm really glad you're here, and I bet you they're thinking they're really glad you're here too.
I do have to say it's one of the most common things I hear when I talk to people. We don't know anything about the judicial elections. How do we find out more about the candidates? So I appreciate you having me on the show and giving me this opportunity to talk to the people.
Yeah, well, and you know, and I know when we first talked, and I had mentioned that, you know, you'd have a whole hour, you were like, wow, a whole hour to talk about running for judge. But, you know, it's a very, very big topic, and there's a lot to be discussed. And so first, before we get started, though, why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself, and then, you know, I know we're going to get calls and there's going to be topics, so we don't want to forget hearing who you are and what you're about.
Okay, thank you. As you said before, my name is Connie Iverson, and I am running for specifically seat number 27 in the 2nd Judicial District. Ramsey County makes up the entire 2nd Judicial District. A lot of people don't know that. So when you look at the ballot, we're on the back of the ballot, so you have to flip it over, and we're about right in the middle of the ballot, and it'll say seat number 27. I'm running against an incumbent. He'll have an I by his name, and his name is William Leary. He's been a judge since 2002. He was appointed by Governor Jesse Ventura, but no one has ever ran against him since his appointment. So just a little bit about myself. I live in Roseville. I've been married for over 20 years, close to 21, to a public school teacher. His name is Stu, and he teaches at Champlain Park High School. He's a social studies teacher there. We have 2 dogs, and we've lived in Roseville for about 11 years now. Right now, I work as a managing attorney at the Ramsey County Public Defender's Office. I've been there off and on since 1992. I moved here in 1989 to go to law school at the University of Minnesota, at their law school. I grew up in Wisconsin, actually, and I went to the University of Wisconsin for my undergraduate, and I graduated with a major in political science and a minor in French.
Oh.
And everybody always like, why French? But it was something I was interested in, and it was really fun to learn. Can't say that I've used it much in my life, but it was a fun thing to learn, and it was a great experience. When I moved here in 1989 to go to law school, became a part of the St. Paul community, basically. We chose St. Paul to live in, and a lot of our friends lived here. And after a very short period of time, we decided we liked it here, and we were going to stay here. And so we've lived here ever since, and we plan on staying here. After graduation, I started working at the Public Defender's Office as a trial attorney. I had clerked for our appellate office when I was in law school, so I had some experience with the Public Defender's Office and really got interested in doing criminal work. Especially at the Public Defender's Office, I think they provide an invaluable service to the citizens of Ramsey County. So I became a trial lawyer and worked in that office. Starting out, my very first trial was a petty theft trial, just in front of a judge, and much to my surprise and delight, I won that trial.
And you said, this is it for me.
Yes, I haven't stopped since. So I worked there until late in 1995 when one of the judges, Judge Mott, who I had just done a homicide trial with, and I was actually successful in that as well. I was very excited about that. He suggested that I apply for a job at Doherty, Rumble and Butler, which at the time was the oldest law firm in the state of Minnesota. They had been hiring a bunch of new associates because they had just started doing tobacco litigation, and so they needed to hire additional help. And they wanted somebody with courtroom experience and trial experience and who knew Ramsey County, because that's where the litigation was taking place.
Right.
So I interviewed with them, and even though I loved the public defender work, I thought, well, this is something different, and I'd like some civil experience as well as my criminal experience. So I went and worked for them for a little over 2 years, working on the tobacco litigation, some products liability, and things like that. So I did have some civil experience in there that I thought was invaluable. So I'm one of those rare attorneys who has a little bit of experience in both areas.
Right, and I can say that from my perspective of being a practicing attorney, I think that that's probably one of the attributes that I think is really very valuable in a judge, is that they've got a lot of variety of background that they can draw upon when they hear cases that come before them. They may not have exactly that experience, but that they have a variety of things that they've been engaged in, so that there's some familiarity in that. And it certainly sounds like you've got a lot of that.
I do. I've done a lot of trials. People ask me sometimes, well, how many have you done? And I guess I've never been vain enough to keep statistics. I'd have to say anywhere from 75 to 100 trials. Like I said, starting with my little petty theft from the old Banks department store, up to major homicides, complex civil litigation. The tobacco litigation case was the biggest lawsuit ever in the state of Minnesota, and that was it was very interesting to work on that. There were a lot of facets to that case, just a lot of different issues that arose in that case. That and I was very lucky to be able to work on that and be part of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of part of history, kind of.
Now, you had mentioned that currently you're a managing attorney, and for our viewers out there, they may not really know, what does a managing attorney do? So tell them a little bit about that.
Okay. Well, our public defender's office in Ramsey County has, depending on the budget, somewhere between 40 and 50 lawyers. I think our highest was 54 lawyers. So it's a number of lawyers. Some are full-time, some work for us part-time, and have private practice on the side as well. We're office downtown in St. Paul, and some public defenders' offices work differently, but ours is divided up into areas of practice. We have a juvenile division, so we have lawyers that work just strictly in juvenile. We have a small office out in the Maplewood courthouse here, out in the suburban courthouse, and we have lawyers just assigned to that courthouse to handle those types of cases. And then we have a misdemeanor trial teams downtown in St. Paul, and then we have felony trial teams. All of the felonies are handled downtown St. Paul. So, because we have so many attorneys, somebody's got to manage them. Somebody's got to do their, scheduling, do their assignments, do their evaluations. We take care of payroll if there is a problem or a complaint.
And probably case assignment. Looking at caseloads.
Exactly. We review their caseloads. We try to keep them even. Since there are way too few of us and way too many cases, a lot of times my job involves stepping in and covering for someone if they end up in trial for a long period of time. We cover the rest of their cases and try to help them along in that way. So that's kind of what you do as a manager. It's kind of like being the utility player in baseball. You do a little bit of everything. You run up at the last minute if somebody's sick. You supervise. You listen to complaints. I probably spend half of my day answering questions. What do I do about this? How should I approach this case? What are the issues and what am I missing? Things like that. So,
and I could see where that type of experience would really lend itself well to being a judge, because a judge doesn't just sit and listen to cases. You have to understand how to approach them, how different attorneys may be approaching a case when they come before you and they're making motions, and you've got all these other kinds of things. You need to understand civil procedure, you need to be able to manage your caseload, get your orders out, answer questions, and be of good spirit the whole entire time.
Exactly. Being a good administrator is crucial. If you have no
Exactly.
administrative experience and you've just worked on your own, you're going to have a difficult time transitioning into that because you have your own staff, you have your own law clerk, you have your own court reporter, you work with the clerk of court staff who come into your courtroom to help you out to do the paperwork and the notices and things like that. You have to work with the deputies, make sure that they have the people who are in custody up on time, make sure that they're there to to manage the courtroom. There's a lot of administrative work. So I've been a managing attorney since 1998, so for quite a while now, and I think that's
You're ready for that next step.
I am.
There you go. Now, I understand that we have our first caller on the line
Okay.
already. So, caller, thank you for waiting patiently. And questions or comments for us this evening? Go ahead. We're going to get the volume out here so we can hear you. Okay, just a second here. We're going to make sure we got that on. Okay, go ahead. Now I think we're going to be able to hear you. Okay, so caller, somehow or other we've had a technical snafu there, but call back or somebody else. Take their place. Call back. Call in and be part of the discussion. Ms. Iverson, when you thought about running for judge, what were some of the decision points for you in coming to this decision?
Okay.
Because it's kind of a big decision.
It is a big decision, and well, I've been a lawyer for 18 years. Most of my practice has been in public service, working for what I call the little guy, people who have been charged with crimes. We represent people on Social Security, anybody who receives any sort of disability, the underemployed, the unemployed. Those are the types of people we represent. We make sure that they get their fair day in court. So I've always been interested in public service, and I think just being a judge is kind of like moving it up one notch. Being able to reach a more broad section of the community and to help a broader section by having that increased role. So that's kind of what I wanted to accomplish by being a judge. So.
Well, it sounds like we do have our caller on the
Okay.
line now. So caller, thank you for calling in. Questions or comments for us this evening? Go ahead.
Diane, I got a question for you.
Okay.
2 weeks ago, you had a gentleman on that was running for the school board,
Yes,
and I think his name was Bennett, if I remember correctly.
that's correct. Yes.
He made the statement when you addressed the subject of too many people on the high echelon, he said to you at the time, we only deal with the schools. The rest of it is brought on by other means of support, like either federal or state.
Okay. Okay. Oh, and I think somehow or other, I in the control room, they're giving me the signal that somehow or other they're having trouble with the phone. But let me, I'm going to guess that maybe what the caller perhaps might be asking, and of course I might be wrong too, so please call back. But the question, if I recall correctly from 2 weeks ago, was about that so much of the governmental agencies and bureaucracies, it all seems to be very top-heavy. And then, of course, there's always the concern about budgeting, and that the money never really seems to go towards the little guy on the street, and that it seems to always go to the top echelons. And then everybody says, well, but we can't provide the service that we're supposed to be here to provide. And that kind of reminds me, and while we're talking about the court system today, I know that you and I previously had conversations about how can the court system best address the needs of those folks who need to go to court who can't afford an attorney, those folks who are pro se, that they have only themselves and their own wits about them to be able to represent themselves. And yet, there's only so much in the way of the budget to be able to assist them. So I know that this is something that you are very concerned about. Maybe you might want to, tell us a little bit about your philosophy on that.
Well, obviously, everybody has a right to an attorney, but along with that right, you have a right to be